In a grand English country house, surrounded by priceless paintings and centuries of antiques, there is a telephone. And next to that telephone, the richest man in the world has installed a coin box, a payphone, so that his house guests cannot make calls on his account. The man who owned this house could have bought a small country. Instead, he counted the coins. And years later, when a telephone call came that every grandfather dreads, that same instinct would lead him to do something the world has never quite forgiven. This is the story of a man who had everything money could buy, except the thing that money cannot. Because power and money are never far apart. His name was Jean Paul Getty. And to understand the ending, you have to start with the oil. Getty did not begin with nothing, but he did not begin with empires either. His father was a careful, self-made oilman, and young Paul learned the trade in the dusty fields of Oklahoma in the early years of the 20th century, buying and selling leases, reading the land, taking risks his rivals would not. He had a gift for it. He could look at a patch of ground that everyone else had passed over and sense the fortune sleeping underneath. By his early 20s, he had already made his first million, back when $1 million was a number most people could not even imagine. But the move that turned a rich man into one of the richest men who has ever lived came later, and it came from patience. In the years after the Second World War, Getty made an enormous gamble. He poured a fortune into a stretch of barren desert in the Middle East, a neutral zone between two kingdoms, betting there was oil beneath the sand. For 4 years, there was nothing, just money pouring into emptiness, and quiet voices saying he had finally lost his touch. And then the ground gave way to one of the oil discoveries of the century. That single bet would eventually make him, by some measures, the richest private citizen on Earth. In 1957, a major magazine named him exactly that, the richest American alive. The public naturally imagined a life of impossible luxury. The truth was stranger and colder. Because Getty, the man who could afford anything, was famously almost pathologically careful with money. The payphone in the mansion was real. He was known to wash his own laundry on the road to avoid hotel fees. He haggled over small sums while sitting atop a fortune most nations would envy. To Getty, money was not a tool for comfort. It was something closer to a scoreboard, a thing to be accumulated and guarded and never, ever wasted. And the people closest to him learned that the warmth he could not find for his money, he could not always find for them either. He married 5 times. 5 times it ended. He was, by many accounts, an absent and difficult father. The empire grew. The family frayed. And here is where the story turns from a portrait of a strange rich man into something far darker. Because the same iron grip that built the fortune was about to be tested in the most public, most painful way imaginable. Keep that payphone in your mind. Keep that instinct, because it is about to cost a 16-year-old boy far more than coins. In the summer of 1973 in Rome, Getty's teenage grandson vanished from the street. The boy, who shared his grandfather's name, was the third Paul Getty. He was young, rebellious, living a wild life in Italy, and one night he simply disappeared. Soon, a message arrived demanding an enormous sum of money for his safe return. The family was being asked to buy the boy back. And the richest man in the world said no. His reasoning, which he stated almost coldly, was this: he had 14 grandchildren. If he paid a ransom for one, he was, in effect, putting a price on the head of every other. Pay once, and you invite the world to come and take the rest. There was a brutal accountant's logic to it. It treated a kidnapping like a business threat to be managed. And while the old man calculated, his grandson sat in captivity in the remote south of Italy, month after month, as the negotiations dragged into a cold and silent standoff. Then came the part of this story that the world has never been able to shake. After months of waiting, the kidnappers, losing patience, cut off a piece of the boy, his ear. They mailed it along with a lock of his hair to a newspaper with a warning that more of him would follow. The message was no longer a demand. It was a horror delivered to a breakfast table. And only then, only when the proof of suffering became impossible to ignore, did the richest man in the world begin to move. But even here, even now, the instinct held. Getty agreed to pay, but he reportedly negotiated the amount down, and he is said to have contributed only the portion that was tax-deductible. The rest he loaned to his own son, the boy's father, at interest. Let that settle for a moment. A grandfather with more money than almost anyone in history structured the rescue of his own grandchild as a loan with terms. The boy was eventually released, alive, but never truly whole again. The ordeal broke something in him that never healed. Getty died a few years later in that same English mansion, one of the wealthiest men who has ever lived. He left behind oil, art, and a museum that still carries his name and draws millions of visitors who know nothing of this story. He also left behind a family marked by the very thing that made him famous. The fortune endured. The people did not always survive it. Now, in fairness, the full truth is more tangled than a simple tale of a heartless old man, and honesty demands we say so. Some who knew him insisted he was genuinely torn, that he feared copycat kidnappings of his other grandchildren, that the early reports of the case were confused, and that the boy's own troubled history made the family slow to believe the threat was real. These things may all be true, but they sit beside a fact that does not move. When a child was in danger, the richest man on earth reached first for the math, and that is the uncomfortable lesson buried in all this gold. We tell ourselves that enough money would make us free, that if we just had enough, the fear would stop. Getty had more than almost anyone, and the fear never stopped. It simply changed shape. The man who could buy anything spent his life guarding it. And in the one moment that mattered most, the guarding won. The same forces still move through the great fortunes of our own time. The families you read about, the dynasties behind the headlines, where wealth and warmth so rarely seem to travel together. So the next time you imagine what you would do with all the money in the world, remember the payphone in the mansion. Remember that the richest man alive once sat with a fortune in one hand and a ransom note in the other, and reached for the calculator. The honest answer to what money does to people is not always comfortable, and it is written in full across the life of Jean Paul Getty. Because power and money are never far apart. Discovery continues.